All right, let's get this party started. I'm going to start out with a quick intro since I know my face is new to a lot of you guys. So, my name is Sarah Luna and I go by she, her, but honestly, I'm okay with any pronouns, honestly. I identify as a polyamorous lesbian slash pansexual and I'm dating the cutie It's a Girl Tara, if you see her in the chat. We met when I came to her house for a one-on-one on feminizing makeup, which good luck. This is the class for that. We've been together for about 6 years now, and I actually met Tizzy through her, and that is how I've met many of you actually. Um, I've lent my talents to you all in the past in demystifying makeup for frustrated beginners and in leveling up skills for those who already have kind of an intermediate level already. Personally, I have over 10 years of experience. I worked for companies such as Urban Decay, Ulta, Sephora. I also frequently work on queer and alternative fashion photo shoots as well. I also do freelance makeup artistry and lessons, including this as well. I am very passionate about makeup, especially makeup education as a tool to assist in those interested in using makeup specifically to define what beauty means to you. Um, Today is going to be my first class, so please bear with me. I'm much more accustomed to teaching in person than I am virtually. But I will be teaching free makeup courses here for you guys with the option to do paid private lessons. So makeup is definitely more so about how you use it for yourself. It's definitely not a one size fits all type of situation. I'm sure you've watched several different YouTube videos and tried to replicate exactly what they did on their face and try to put it on yours, and then what it looks like on them just doesn't translate the same way, and that's okay. Like, everyone's faces are different, and that's what I'm here for. So I'm going to teach you how to do things for yourself with what desired end goals that you might have in mind. Um, with that being said, please feel free to DM me. This class specifically today is going to be on feminizing makeup, but obviously I'm more than comfortable doing masculinizing makeup or more androgenizing makeup as well. So please stay tuned. We're definitely going to have a lot more coursework coming up, and I really, really, really want most of the feedback and most of the decisions with regard to what we're going to be discussing to be made by you guys. So try to keep it as inclusive as possible. We don't want it to just be feminizing. We want everything, okay? We can go from even skincare, like beginner to intermediate skincare as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, how you're using makeup is a part of your self-expression. It's no different than how you customize your avatar or anything like that. It's just your real life self. You're customizing yourself, you know, presenting how you want to be. So, with that being said, everybody is different. Everybody has different objectives for what they want makeup to do for them. So again, for the purpose of today's live stream, we're going to be focusing primarily on feminizing makeup. So before, I know I look a little crazy, a little two-face moment here, but this side of my face, full face of feminizing makeup. Now, personally, I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, so I have a lot of facial hair and acne. I also tend to lose my eyelashes due to an autoimmune condition that I have as well. So before I do anything, cleanse your face. I'm not going to get super finicky in it. We're just going to start with the basics. So cleanse and moisturize. Shaving is very important, especially if you want a very smooth surface. I will say, however, though, you don't want to shave immediately before you put makeup on. So usually you'll do it the night before or maybe 15-20 minutes beforehand. Also, you don't want to put makeup directly over something that you just cut open, essentially. So you're going to want to wait at least 20 minutes, put something on your skin, primarily aloe or witch hazel, something soothing, calming, that's going to kind of cool down the irritation to where you're able to put on a full face of makeup hygienically. So I've already done all of that, put moisturizer on. And another thing, so when you've shaved your face and everything, since you want this area to kind of breathe especially, I highly recommend starting with this area first, because then you're able to save time. And if you make any mistakes, especially as a beginner, I can't emphasize this enough, start with the tough start. Start with the tough stuff first. So this area is going to be probably the most challenging to kind of work with here. So definitely working in this area. If I mess up, if this gets full of fallout from the eyeshadow, I can literally just take a little makeup wipe, clean it all away and start fresh. Or if I drew this eyebrow and I didn't really like that my eyebrows are so straight and I wanted to arch them a little bit more, again, not the end of the world. I can just wipe it off and start over if I want to. Actually, a pro tip, you can fold it in half and clean up really easily that way as well. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. So what we're going to start with is this area. What I like to do first is lay down a base. So you're going to want something like an even base. So whether that's concealer or if it's like an eyeshadow primer. Being that I used to work for Urban Decay, I have a lot of these type of things around. So it does not matter the brand though, trust me. We'll even do videos on affordable budget brands, whether you're in the US or UK, or if you want more high-end luxury, what I think is for different skin tones, different skin needs, dry skin, oily skin, etc. But eyeshadow primer or concealer are both valid options. Whatever works for you, whatever you're more comfortable with. You can go super messy with this too, which is nice. I'm literally not even watching what I'm doing, just to kind of prove a point. Take a blending sponge, or you can use a cosmetic brush. Either it's fine. I prefer to use a sponge because I can just dab it in really quickly, and it does all the hard work for me. I do recommend wetting your sponge beforehand, though. It makes the sponge a lot bigger, a lot bouncier. It doesn't have to be a name brand sponge. This one happens to be a beauty blender, but Real Techniques are just as good, and they are like a third, probably a quarter of the price, honestly. So now that that is all even, I'm going to start doing my eyebrow. Now, the reason I do eyebrows first is because normally I'll have shaved and then I go immediately into kind of like tweezing any excess hair that might be in the way. I'm alternative, so I tend to shave the tail end of my eyebrow so I can redraw it on a lot angled, a lot higher, especially because I have kind of hooded eyes, and that kind of helps to lift this entire area up. So if you look at this eye versus this eye, you see how it's very foxy, very lifted. Even my eyebrow is angled more. If I were to push all of this down more, it's going to make my brow bone seem heavier than it really is. And if you already have secondary sex characteristics that cause your brow bone to protrude more, you're going to want to minimize that if you want a quote unquote feminized, and again, I'm using the word feminized loosely here. It's based off of what perceived gender norms we might have in Western society. So a bigger brow bone tends to be seen as something a little bit more masculinizing. So again, if you were doing like an androgenizing look, I might actually emphasize that. But today we're feminizing, so kind of focusing shadow on this outer area to make this whole area go up, and brightening this area where the brow bone would tend to cover and make it really shadowed. We're going to brighten this area. And then eyebrows, we're going to keep them rounder or straighter. Angled brows can kind of be very kind of masculinizing in some ways as well. So keeping things more rounded tends to make things softer. Again, it depends on your personal facial attributes as well. So this might not be a one size fits all. These tend to be what people perceive. So again, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I'm basing these off of pop culture, essentially. So we're going to start with eyebrows again. Personally, I like to use a pomade. This one is just the one from Honest. And chat, yes, I do tweeze my eyebrows myself. But that is just because I'm comfortable enough to do so. I do recommend going to an esthetician to get them tweezed for the very first time yourself, or waxed, or threaded, whatever you prefer. And then from there, I just maintain it. For this, though, we are going to take a pomade on a angled brush and run that through my eyebrow. We're not going to be super precise about this because we're going to take this little spoolie on the end and rough it up. If you'll notice, I'm just kind of literally using this kind of like a pencil, but if I want it to be softer, I kind of press it and drag it because I don't want it to be too harsh. Eyebrows, especially, if you do your eyebrows too dark, it can actually age you because it makes your facial features a little bit harsher looking. So we want to make these a lot softer. I am using things that are slightly darker, just where it translates a little bit more dramatically on camera to where you're able to see a little bit better. But if I were to take everything that I'm doing right now and just soften it with a different color, it would look like no makeup. I'm just doing dramatic, darker colors to make it more obvious what I'm doing on camera. Every couple of seconds, I'll look down just to see how even or not even they are. Obviously, I'm not done with this side yet. I need to still put some more here. Oh yeah, definitely what Audrey said. Eyebrow razors are a godsend. I have so many of them. I have literally, they're just laying around. Make sure they're sanitized though. You can even use them for dermaplaning, which is if you have peach fuzz, especially a lot of my trans sisters who have had electrolysis or laser, they might just have peach fuzz left over. As long as your face is clean and you've sanitized everything, you're perfectly okay to just kind of get rid of any peach fuzz that way, especially with like the little area right here where you tend to get like sideburns. There tends to be a lot more peach fuzz right in this area too. That is really good for cleaning up. All right. Another cool thing you can do too is the same way that you fill in your eyebrows, you can actually fill in your hairline a little bit as well. Like if you wanted to give yourself a little bit of a widow's peak or anything like that. Let's see. You can literally just, because you want it to match the root color of your hair, you can kind of just feather that in and even take the spoolie and really make it blend into your hairline too. And make that whole area come forward more. Now, this is mostly just filled in with a little bit of pomade. You can use a pencil, you can use even eyeshadow. But to really seal the deal, especially if you have sparse eyebrows or if you shave them off to draw them up higher, which is common, especially if you do have a bigger brow bone, sometimes it's a little bit easier to do your makeup this way, is to get a soft base of brown. And then this is drugstore. This is NYX or NYX. It's just an eyebrow pen that is a slightly darker than this color, and you can literally fill it in little hair-like brush strokes. You just use a very light hand, and you can draw individual hairs. I'm just doing a little more on this side so you can kind of see what it does. But they're little individual little eyebrow hair strokes. So even though my eyebrow ends here, it looks more three-dimensional still. Here and here. Again, you don't have to do this. This is just a really cool way that if you have really thin eyebrows or if you tend to remove most of the hair out here to make things lifted, that is how you draw the individual hairs back in. So now the eyebrows are done. We're going to start in eyeshadow. So we still have that same base, that same concealer base. If you want, if it starts to get like separated like that, you can just kind of pop it back on again. Now, the reason I do this is not only to cover up any discoloration from my eye area, but also to give any kind of powder product something to grip to and to blend out a lot more seamlessly. So, a really cool thing I like to do is actually use your bronzer, so the shade that you tend to put on the outer perimeter of your face, just put that all in the crease area. And I'm going to use the fluffiest eyeshadow brush I have. This is just an e.l.f. one, super cheap, like $3, I swear. And you're gonna just kind of press that into the outer eye area and swirl to blend it in little circles. When I go to this area, I tend to swirl this way up to the eyebrow, and it kind of blends itself out. Because did you see when I first put it on, it was just like a giant blotch, and now it's all blending out. Also, I have no issues with any specific brands, but I personally am a cruelty-free makeup artist, so I pretty much exclusively use brands that do not test on animals. That is not to say that I do not have experience in other brands as well, so please let me know. That's just a personal ethics that I have, but I have no problem in researching other products as well. Now taking a tiny little fluffy brush and just connecting that under my eye. Again, since we're doing this first, you can be as messy as you want to be. If you have a whole bunch of like little flecks of fallout here, doesn't matter, we're going to clean it up. That's part of the fun of this is honestly like my me time in the morning, my zen time is just putting on like my war paint for the day. Whatever I decide to look like that day. It's part of the process. It's part of me helping define myself, define what beauty is to me. There are no real rules with makeup either. It's just a matter of personal preference and experience. So this eyeshadow brush that I'm using could technically also be used to like contour my nose or blend out a lip color or a whole bunch of other things as well. I'm just happen to be using it for this. Again, this is a bronzer shadow. It's literally just my bronzer, but I'm just packing it on. So this specific area, so if you see I'm looking dead on, a lot of people make the mistake, especially when they're starting out with makeup, of only applying it on the lid. If you have a bigger brow bone, you're going to want to apply it slightly above that when you're blending. You don't want to blend it all the way up to your eyebrow, obviously, but this area right here where the bone protrudes the most and where you tend to have a little bit of a fat pad, that whole area you're going to want to apply shadow to. So it's almost like from the crease following your eyebrow in an upward angle where the top of your ear is, to kind of get that cat lifted effect. And again, we're only applying this to the outer half of the eyebrow because if I do right in here, that might make it look like my brow bone is a little heavier here, and we don't want that. So I did a bronze shade, and now I'm going to go in with a slightly darker shade right here. Again, tapping for more pigment, and then little circles to blend it out. So we have a blended kind of transition color and then something slightly darkening it. From there, you can take a slightly small fluffy brush and do a little bit of the darkest shade right here, blending it into your lash line. So this whole outer area, almost in a little bit of a C shape, is that darker color. And again, you can see all these tiny little flecks of eyeshadow down here. This is why I like doing eyeshadow first, so I can be super fast and messy with it, and it'll still look just as pretty as if I had spent 2 hours on it by doing it in like the traditional order of doing your face first and then your contour and your everything else, you know. I like doing eyebrows, eyeshadow, and then I can just take off with like barely like minimum makeup and just head out the door just with a little bit of color correction and you're good. Or you can be more dramatic like this. Just making sure this is blended. All right, so we have a nice little blend happening over here. But if you'll remember, we want to keep this inner half more on the light side. So you can just take your sponge or your brush and lightly tap here, and it'll kind of blend very evenly into that. And you can add a really nice light shimmery color if you want. You can just leave it like this. Personally, I like a little bit of shimmer, so I like to take, I find that using brushes for shimmer can sometimes make more of a mess than it's worth. So I prefer to use actually like a fingertip. If you happen to have longer nails, I'm very lesbian, so I don't, but if you do have longer nails, you can use like your knuckle or the side of your knuckle and kind of press it in this way as well. I promise I'm not flipping you off. This is just my favorite finger for kind of applying this. So I'm just kind of stamping it in. And then if I want to blend it, I can kind of just drag it into it a little bit. Do you see how more open and pretty and blended this seems, just with a little light shimmer? And anything that reflects light is going to make this area seem like it's coming forward. So shadow, things are going back. Light, they're coming forward. So we want this area, which is normally more sunken in if you have a bigger brow bone, to come forward, while this area is more softened and lifted. Yes, you can use a makeup sponge as well, whatever works for you. Again, brushes, makeup sponge. I just happen to be using a really big makeup sponge with whatever little product is left from when I put that base down for my eye. Now that I kind of have that going on, I can go into eyeliner. I could do an entire video on eyeliner. So I'm going to start out with the basics, something very simple, using a dark brown or a black eyeliner. You can kind of just lift this and kind of draw in here. And that will kind of give you thicker lash effect, especially if you have like no lid at all. You might want to just keep it only in that area. If you have a little bit more you can play around with, you can go over the lash line a little bit and then use your finger. The heat from your finger will naturally blend it if it is like a cream pencil. So I'm going to do that real fast. Again, you can be super messy with it because you can just blend it really easily. Again, see how messy this is. Super messy. But I can just go in and blend it out with my finger while it is not quite set yet, because a lot of creamy eyeliners tend to set after a couple of seconds. So don't let it sit for too long. And it'll create a nice soft blurred effect. You can use liquid eyeliner. I really like this one from NYX. That's really nice as well. Gives you a nice line that is pretty waterproof as well. But if you're just starting out, that might be a little intimidating. So just starting out with something you can be messy with and play around with until you get a little bit more confident, and you can go into liquid eyeliner from here. And yes, this is being recorded. We're going to be streaming it as well to our Twitch and I believe our YouTube as well. If I'm going too fast, I do apologize. I do have only an hour, so I am trying to go at a steady pace, but I know that, like, please feel free to talk in the chat. I can kind of glance at it every once in a while and see, especially if a lot of people bring up the same thing, I can kind of go into it a little bit more as well. Putting a tiny bit down on the lower lash line as well. Again, this is really nice, especially if you're just starting out. And I often do this as well for mature clients that I have, because a lot of times the eye area can be a little bit crepey and it might be a little hard for you to get that nice, precise, like Marilyn Monroe cat eye that a lot of people go for. But this is still just as beautiful and gives you that really sultry, smoky effect as well. A cool thing too is if you, there we go, do a tiny bit right here, you can kind of just blink it and it'll kind of naturally wing itself while it's still kind of tacky. So I kind of just blinked onto my finger and dragged it up, and that kind of creates its own natural little wing. So pencils are going to go on a lot thicker, a lot creamier, and you can literally smear them a lot. Especially if you want that smoky effect. It's also going to be easier to work with in your waterline area. A liquid eyeliner is not going to stick in that tiny little area in there. Because it's liquid, it's going to slide around a lot more. So this is liquid and this is pencil. Liquid can come in like a tip, like a felt tip or a brush tip, which is the case of this one. This is a brush tip. And there's even eyeliner pots as well that you can get that it's kind of like a little, like an inkwell that you can kind of dip your brush into and then keep reapplying. Liquid is going to be a lot straighter, a lot more crisp, a lot more for that cat eye and precision. A pencil is definitely going to be your friend for just kind of smoothing and blending out. I always recommend starting out with pencil, whether you have to sharpen it or whether it twists up. This one happens to be a twist up. It just goes up and down. Again, does not have to be super expensive. I honestly really like using drugstore eyeliners because I go through them so quickly. NYX tends to be one of my favorite brands for eyeliners in general. And we will definitely be doing an entire video for sure on selecting foundation shades for yourself as well. There's also a lot of helpful websites as well that I can compile for you guys as well, to where you're all able to see everything in one little spot and make it nice and easy too. So now that I've kind of done this eye area, I like to kind of go over that eyeliner with a dark brown eyeshadow to really blend it, to make it not look as like, see how this one, you can barely tell I have eyeliner. It looks like it just all blends together. A little bit of dark brown eyeshadow is going to do that. Nice thing about doing this too is it helps to set your eyeliner. To where if you have really oily eyelids, like I do, it's going to prevent it from messing up all that hard work you just did. And again, when I'm doing this outer part, I just kind of want to point it all the way up to the top of my ear. That tends to be the most lifted angle. Again, different people are going to have different lengths and adjustments here, but this tends to be anatomically a good anchor point and a good reference point for most face shapes. Oh my god, I hate when the security guards follow you around. I promise I'm not stealing. Honestly, I know a lot of people are intimidated by going to makeup stores with a fresh face, like no makeup on. They're like, oh my god, they're gonna judge me. Honestly, personally, as like a makeup artist, that's my favorite thing to do because then I can test all the different products and see how they work for me in a way that I wouldn't be able to if I already had my full beat, you know? So don't be afraid to do that, please. Try out. And that way, honestly, when I go into stores to color match myself, you want to take your neck and your chest into account because usually your face and neck, if you wear sunscreen, are going to be slightly lighter than your body. Some people prefer to match directly to their skin tone, and other people prefer to match their body, which can be a little bit darker, depending on if you self tan and etc. as well. But I tend to swatch makeup right here because I can see it in context of my neck and my chest. And honestly, cheap makeup can be really good. Um, ooh, yeah, cheap makeup can be really good. Honestly, a lot of this stuff, like these brushes are Morphe brushes, super affordable. You can get them in bundles. Um, the eyeliner I use is drugstore. You don't have to break the bank on makeup, especially if you were just trying it out for the first time. Buy some cheap stuff to kind of play around with first, and then you can kind of level it up from there the more confident you get. If your face is way darker than the rest of your body, then it could be that you do need a little bit more SPF protection on your face. Um, but it's not the end of the world, honestly. If your face is slightly darker, then you can just match the lighter tone and kind of match it all together too. It's personal preference. Some people prefer to match darker, some people prefer to match to the lighter tone. But most of us, especially the darker your complexion becomes, the more tones you're going to have in your skin. You're going to reflect a lot more light, you're going to have different undertones, a lot of different things to kind of consider. So I'll definitely be looking forward to making a video on specifically color matching and foundation. Yeah, that's much more blended. It's less obviously eyeliner now. I also like to take an even brighter shimmer color and pop it right here. Again, this area tends to be more overshadowed and more dark if you have a bigger brow bone, and this is going to illuminate this whole area. Again, I'm just stamping it on with my finger. Here we go. Again, this whole mess is gonna go away. We don't have to worry about it. I will say that having worked for Ulta and Sephora, Ulta is definitely going to be more accessible for those of you who want more drugstore friendly options. Sephora is going to have the superior assistance with the employees. Oh, the clearance is the best. Just going to take that wipe, clean up under the eye area. So now this whole area is nice and tidied up. My skin's going to be a little bit red though. That's just because I have super sensitive skin. I do like to remove a little bit of that kind of greasiness left over, just to where it doesn't make any makeup I put on top of this difficult. Speaking of which, I do like using a face primer, especially after you've done your skincare, because this, sometimes when you're doing your skincare and you're rubbing it in on your face, sometimes when you go to put your makeup over it, you'll even see like the lines left from your product that you rubbed in. So this kind of helps to remove that. This also helps to fill in any texture or fine lines on the skin as well, especially pores. I have very large inflamed pores due to my hormonal imbalance. So this definitely helps to fill them in and give me a little bit more confidence when it comes to my makeup. It also helps me to use less product too. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive to add a product to use less product, but it helps my foundation, concealer, everything go a lot longer, a lot further. At Sephora's as well, they have the Color IQ, which digitally takes samples from here, here, and here and averages them out. Kind of like, this is gonna sound really silly, but you know when you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you can kind of take a paint sample to them and they'll color match it. It's literally the same technology, but it's for your skin and it also assesses what type of skin you have, whether it's oily or dry, and recommends skincare to you and specific products to you based off of your skin type as well. It assesses your skin hydration, pores, textures, line, etc. It's very good. Now, a big mistake I see a lot of people make, especially if they're trying to cover up any darkness in their under eyes or in their facial hair, is you'll have someone like as fair as myself, even though like I'm the palest Mexican you'll ever come across. A lot of times, everyone is just like, oh my God, orange color corrects any darkness. And they go in for the darkest orange. But really, people who have a darker skin tone should be using this. People with a fairer complexion should be using more of a peach tone. So anywhere I tend to get a little bit of facial hair and under my eye area, where any kind of gray tones. So if you look at a color wheel, I wish I had one. I don't know why I'm doing this, so I don't have one, but um, orange and blue and yellow and purple, those are going to be on the opposite sides of the color wheel, so they cancel each other out. So by applying this peachy, yellowy orange color on top of that blue, they cancel each other out. If you have a darker skin tone, more straight up orange is going to be more helpful than a peach tone, which can kind of make you look a little ashy. Oh, thank you, chat. You guys are the best. You can use a sponge for this. I'm just using the natural heat from my fingertips to blend this in just because it is a little bit thicker in consistency. If it were creamier, I would use the brush or the sponge. But even just doing that has already, like, I could probably just blend this out a little bit better and just head out if I wanted to, just because that's already color corrected everything, and just leave the natural pink tones coming through my skin if I wanted. Yeah, if you're a little bit in between, you can definitely mix these two together or get something a little bit more in between. They're it's weird. They're both called concealer. This one, these tend to be called more color correctors. Again, it's all just marketing really, but they tend to be concealers, color correctors. Concealers are going to be your skin tone or maybe a shade lighter, depending on the desired effects you want. A color corrector is going to be more specifically to cover up a specific alternative color that you don't want to be seen. So this one, you can kind of do like what I just did to color correct. And then a lot of times people go in with concealer over the top or just their foundation, which is their skin tone, over the top of it. Personally, less is more. It's going to leave less texture on the skin. It's going to look more breathable, more natural. Again, I'm just doing more dramatic colors just where it's more easy to see on stream. Oh, trust me, there's so many terms. Believe it or not, I didn't start playing around with makeup until I was already in college, and I'm in my 30s. So those 10 years of makeup experience were very quickly accumulated. So now that I've done that little color correction, I like to just go in with foundation personally because I feel like you can, again, less is more. A lot of that will very easily be covered up with just your foundation. And then if you need to go in a little harder, like if I was breaking out or something, like I was on my jawline over here, I just add a little bit more over here. So I am very pale at the moment. I am in between shades. So I'm going to mix my winter shade, aka my lightest shade, with my summer shade, aka my darkest shade, to get my skin tone. But ideally, you wouldn't have to do that because you would just have the correct shade. But if you have or if you already know what your darkest shade is and what your lightest shade is at any given point of the year, as long as you have one of those two, or excuse me, like your lightest shade and your darkest shade, you can just mix all of the shades that you're going to be throughout the rest of the year too. If you want to save more money. Same. I am indoors all the time, which is why I'm the palest Mexican. Now, if you notice, I'm just stamping this. I'm literally just like smacking myself in the face with this because bouncing it blends it. If I smear it, if I were to drag it, it can it can kind of get kind of cakey or heavy looking, and it also smears it and slides it around. So I prefer to tap it in because that's going to give you the correct amount of coverage that you want. And this is just foundation. This is actually a mixture of the foundation from Ilia, which is high end, and Elf Cosmetics, their CC cream, which is like a tinted moisturizer, which is drugstore, like more low end. Which also is a hack for getting your high-end foundations to last a little bit longer too, is you can kind of mix them with a drugstore foundation that you already know your skin agrees with. And that way it goes a little bit further. I like to bring it down my neck a little bit as well, just because I am going to be contouring my jawline a little bit too to soften it. Taking extra care around the eye area where I did all that hard work. And if you mess up or you go over it a little bit, even though the foundation is still slightly wet, if you just kind of brush again, it'll put it right back. I don't have anything on my brush because I don't want any fallout to stick to this now, but just kind of helping to soften it. If you have a really dark beard shadow, I would work in very thin layers. So do a very thin layer of the more orange tone. Let it kind of absorb into your skin a little bit. You can even do like a light dusting, a very light dusting of powder, and just kind of press it over that area. Let it absorb into your skin a little bit, and then go in with the next layer, and then that should probably cover it up completely. Different brushes. Realistically, you can easily get away with just one fluffy brush for doing eyeshadow if you're a minimalist, just as long as you're able to clean your brush. If you are a minimalist, I do recommend getting something like this. This is, it'll focus, a dry makeup brush cleaner. It's basically just a really rough sponge that you can swirl your brushes into, and it gets rid of whatever pigment was left in here to where I can go in from like black to orange without the orange looking black, etc. So it kind of just deletes whatever color was in this brush. So you could get away with just using one brush realistically, as long as it's not too fluffy and not too small. Um, but personally, I just like getting a couple of cheap brushes from like Elf Cosmetics or Morphe. 90% of my brushes are from Morphe. I also really, really, really love It Cosmetics. This is amazing. I love their brushes. It feels like a bunny tail. It's ooh yes, proper brush cleaning is definitely a must. This is great for changing color, but obviously this is not going to sanitize your brush. You do need to wash them periodically just to make sure that they are hygienic, especially if you're someone like me who uses brushes on other people as well. I hope you guys are learning new things. So, personally, I really don't think I need to go in with any extra concealer. The foundation covered enough, and I really don't want to look cakey or heavy at all. I like my skin to be really, I want it to look like skin, but better. You know? I don't want there to be heavy creasing or lines or wrinkles that you can see. A little bit of shimmer might reveal some of my texture, like my pores, but that's about it. So you can take a pressed powder or a loose powder, doesn't matter, whichever, it's personal preference. But you're going to take that on a big fluffy brush and press that into the skin. If your concealer looks cakey, it could be that you're using too much. It could also be that you are not setting it with powder, and so it separates and looks cakey. So by setting, ironically enough, by setting, especially areas that move around a lot, like the under eye, the corner of the mouth, especially when you smile, this area right here tends to crease a lot. And once you've pressed it, then you can kind of swipe around. Now, a lot of people will bake these areas. Personally, I think that's a little extra for every day. Personally, I just stamp the powder everywhere that I want it to be to where it doesn't move. This is going to make it last throughout the day. It's going to make it to where you can touch your face without it ending up all over. You can hug people without your foundation transferring onto them. Um, every week I clean my brushes with soap and water. Not every week because I'm bad sometimes, but if I'm using, especially you're strict when I'm using brushes, my client brushes, but these are just my personal brushes. But at least every week, just soap and water. Ironically enough, Dawn is really like Dawn dish soap is actually really good at getting rid of any greasy buildup, especially on foundation brushes. You can also use antibacterial soap. Sephora has brush cleaner sprays. So does Ulta too. Personally, I think the Sephora brand one works a little bit better than the Ulta brand though. So that is all set. I can touch my face now. And the reason I'm doing this now, even though I don't have any blush or contour or highlight or anything else, is because I'm going to use powder products on top of this. If I were to go in with the powder products, so if I were to use the bronzer and go over it when it was still wet with a powder product, it's going to be extremely pigmented. It's going to stick and it's not going to want to blend. However, if you do use like cream products, like this is a cream blush, I would do that before you powder. So it's kind of like spaghetti, like you're going to powder over the wet sauce. Just think of it kind of like that. Think of it kind of like you're powdering over the wet sauce. Lemon juice and baking powder, or maybe baking soda rather, um, can just beware. Some brushes are synthetic, some brushes are going to be animal hair. As a cruelty-free makeup artist, pretty much all of my brushes are going to be synthetic fiber, which means that they're also more antibacterial as well because they do not have the porosity that natural hair does. Like your hair, like the reason my hair is able to take hair dye is because it's porous and it can absorb things. Ones made from fur or hair can kind of be less antibacterial friendly because they are porous. So you're going to need to clean them more often, but you're also going to need to clean them more gently. These like this is just like a Sephora brand brush that I really like that I got as like a little holiday kit. You can get like little brush kits that are really nice. It's like double-ended. So this one is supposedly for highlighter, but I use it for blush. This one is for blush, but I use it for contour. Like Again, there's no rules in makeup. Yes, dust the wets. Now, a really cool life hack that you can do, by the way, especially if you have difficulty trying to find a really good lip color or a blush color for yourself, is to squeeze your hand really tight. And this color that comes up is your natural blush color. You can see it in the edges of your hand as well. If you have a darker skin tone, I find that it's easier to see here than here. And that color, especially if you're swatching in a store, squeeze your hand really tight and you can just swatch blushes or lip colors here and see whatever matches that tone the most. That's what's going to look the most natural for you. That was something actually I learned in art school that I just, because they say like the blush tone should be continuous throughout the body, it makes sense to use it for makeup. But the natural blush tone you're going to have, this is going to be the same color here and here where your blood naturally comes to the surface of your skin. Now, that isn't to say that you can only wear those colors. That's just if you want it to be like that no makeup natural, like not super obvious kind of makeup. So you can take bronzer and highlighter and blush on the cheekbone typically. Again, I like to use the top of the ear as a kind of really easy anchor point, and I like to do the darkest first. So the darkest to me is that darker brown tone that kind of gives dimension to the face. You see how this face side has more curves to it, it's more soft. This area seems very flat. So I'm taking an angled brush. Again, this is a blush brush, but I like to use it because it's angled. And you're just kind of lightly tap. So there's an imaginary line between the corner of your mouth and the top of your ear, and it's going to hang slightly. But don't apply it past here. You don't want it to be too close. A little goes a long way. So do a tiny bit on your brush, and sometimes you can even like knock it off. I do apologize if any of you guys have things to do after this lesson, but I would rather be thorough in explaining and go a little bit over the time. So, if you'll notice, I'm applying it directly above the imaginary line I'm creating between my mouth corner and the top of my ear. Now, this works really well if you have a very round face or if you have pronounced cheekbones, but you're not gaunt. If you do this and you are already very slender, it can sometimes make you appear more gaunt than you actually are. So again, we have different ways of contouring for different facial structures, but this tends to be the best rule of thumb. You're just going to go a little bit softer if you have less fat in your face. Now, I'm also going to take a tiny bit up here, especially in the hairline, to make my forehead seem smaller. And you can kind of just do that in little circles and kind of match it a little bit into the area you already did. So I kind of have a little Pac-Man of bronzer here. But now this is receding more. Actually, I forgot to do it on this side. So it's making my larger forehead seem a little bit more narrow now. And again, you just kind of marry that to where you've already applied the product. Sometimes I actually like to go in again, just because I'm extra fond of blending with the powder brush that I used, just to really soften it and make it look natural. So now that you've had a little bit of a C shape here, we're going to turn that into kind of a reverse E shape because I have a very pronounced jawline right here, but I want it to be softer like on this side. I want to bring more attention to my chin pointing down and less attention to the angularity of my jaw. So without making a face, you're going to want to keep your face at like a resting point. And whatever you're trying to make recede or seem smaller, you're going to put darker. And anything you want to make more prominent, you're going to make lighter. But do you see how that's already brought this in and defined it more? And yes, this will be on our Twitch and hopefully on our YouTube soon as well. Now, you don't want to overdo it in here because you don't want to create like, you don't want to undo all of that undoing of beard shadow that we've just done. So you wanted to use a light hand if you're going to contour your jawline because you want it to look like a shadow and you don't want it to look too orange. Which is why I like to bring the foundation down my neck a little bit. Just to where I can blend it out a little bit more. And then often, to make my chin a little pointier and a little softer here, instead of large and round, I add a tiny bit here and here. And now that you've done all of that, we can use the blush. Now, you could very easily just leave the house like this. Again, you don't need to do more steps if you don't feel like you need them. This is just for anybody who is wanting to see a very comprehensive full face of feminizing makeup. So I've taken a little bit of blush on a fluffier, slightly pointed brush, and you're going to want to apply this kind of above where we applied bronzer and contour down here. It's going to go right on top of that. But you want to tap it in and blend it in. You don't want to look like Neapolitan ice cream. And again, I don't want to bring this in too much in the center of my face. I'm applying it in a way that lifts other people, especially if you are more gaunt, you might want to apply it in a more circular region here to kind of give you that more like childish kind of roundness to your face or like a youthfulness back. But for me, I already have very prominent cheekbones, but a wider jawline, so I tend to like to lift this area as opposed to making it more round. I also like to do a tiny bit on my chin. Anywhere that your skin would naturally have a little bit more blood kind of peeking through. I know that sounds morbid, but the areas that are prominent tend to have more blood flowing through them, especially if you're blushing. That's why it's called blush. Sorry about that. We're back, I promise. My camera just fell asleep because I hadn't touched it in a minute. I'm also gonna do a tiny bit under my nose as well. You don't really know what will happen until you start HRT, but a lot of times if you're just on testosterone blockers, it can even just testosterone blockers can significantly reduce the appearance of your facial hair. If you're on HRT as well, in addition to testosterone blockers, a lot of times that will soften your facial hair. If you haven't even developed any yet, there's a good chance that you might not develop it as intensely. It depends on each person, though, unfortunately, especially genetics. Um, like me personally, my genetics are to have facial hair, unfortunately. But, other people, like my sister, for example, she doesn't have any. She's not going to have any issues with that. Um, yeah, same with T. Same with T. Some guys just really, really start growing in the facial hair. Other guys don't. You won't really know until you try. And a lot of times too, it's going to take a while for your body to kind of stabilize, to get to kind of like a kind of plateau point of what is normal for you. The first couple months are definitely going to be really hectic and you're not really going to know what to expect until it kind of evens out. In the meantime, though, makeup can fix a lot, especially if you do start to grow in facial hair and you finding electrolysis or laser is above your means. Definitely shaving and doing a good job of just covering and color correcting is going to go significantly. Now, the final step to really get this polished is a little bit of shimmer, and we're going to apply that on the highest point, the part that we really want to be noticed, and that's really going to make this pop. Now, I'm just using a foundation brush, like a flat foundation brush, to make this really noticeable on camera. I'm just kind of blending it on here. Can do a tiny bit here. Bit on your chin if it's not too prominent. Otherwise, you might want to skip it if you want to keep this area looking more receded still. And then I also like to take a tiny, tiny bit and kind of blend it in that area again. But you can literally use your blush, your contour, and your highlighter, and it makes your life so much easier. And then all you really need is like a black or a dark brown eyeshadow, and you're good. Less products that way, especially if you aren't keen on doing a whole bunch of different like colorful looks or anything like that. You just have your routine and that's what you stick to. You don't have to break the bank. I also like to put a tiny, tiny bit on the brow bone, not too much, because you still want it to stay relatively kind of tucked back there, but that's like the icing on the cake of the blend here. All right. So from there, we can finally do my lips. This has been bugging me this entire video. I'm sorry. So you don't have to overline. I'm just going to say that. A lot of people do not have to overline their lips. I do not have to overline my lips either. Embrace your natural lip shape if you want to. But a lot of people find having a um, more defined lip, especially, can be very feminizing because it's shortening the distance between your philtrum, so between your lips and your nose. The shorter this distance here is, the more geometrically your face tends to be perceived as more feminine. So for this, again, remember dark is to recede and light is to bring forward. So I'm going to use the darker shade around the outer perimeter of my lips. Another thing too is if you're trying to overline here, if we're trying to overline the lips, you can see where my lips naturally are. A lot of people make the mistake of overlining the entire upper lip, and that can make you look very Lucille Ball, very 50s, where it's very dramatic, very archy, very, it's giving McDonald's and not in a good way. So what we want to do is just only overline here in the center area and then come down, taper into your natural lip line. So I've only really overlined up here and then blended it into my natural lip line. Same for down here. You're going to want to overline just only this part and then blend it into your natural line over here. All right. I'm using a slightly darker color just to where it's more obvious what I'm doing. And then a slightly lighter color in the middle will really give you that three-dimensionality. That's the lips done. Another thing you can do too that's really easy to do, especially if you want like more of a no makeup feminizing makeup, is to actually take your lipstick, whether it's liquid or like a cream, and actually apply it to the tip of your middle finger, and you can just kind of blot here, here, and then the center pout, and then melt your lips together a little bit, and it'll give you a natural kind of effortless, kind of really cute pouty effect without having to go through all the effort of actually like drawing on your lipstick, especially if you're just starting out. Exactly. Less is more is definitely what you want to go for. Now, obviously mascara is important, but so is keeping all of your makeup on for the whole day. And I find that setting spray on before you put on your mascara is definitely the way to go because it'll definitely prevent it from flaking down as a result of like the liquid aspect of it. But setting spray, essentially, they usually have aloe as like an active ingredient. It kind of like presses the makeup into your skin in a mist way that doesn't disrupt your makeup and prevents it from coming off, from sweating off, from getting disrupted if you're going in the water, etc. So all around. Ooh, sunscreen. I always apply sunscreen after my moisturizer and before I do my foundation. There's also, they make like brands like Supergoop, for example. That's Super Goop. They make a really cool thing to where they have like a setting spray that is an SPF that you can reapply throughout the day over your makeup without it disrupting your makeup. And they also make kind of like the powder brush that I have. Imagine this was full of sunscreen setting powder and you could just tap it on your face throughout the day and it would actually reapply your sunscreen as like a powder SPF throughout the day. That's really cool. Super convenient, especially since you are supposed to reapply sunscreen, and I know a lot of us don't really reapply. All right. Mascara. By the way, I actually really recommend doing mascara, applying it first on your lower lashes. That way, um, you don't kind of ruin all of the hard work you've just done by like blinking or going up like this to do your lower lashes, and all of a sudden you have all of the tracks of your mascara all over the hard work you just did. So do your lower lashes first because these lashes are naked and can rub against this without any issues right now. And I kind of just zigzag it along. I'm barely touching them, barely touching these lashes. So now that we've done the lower part, then I can go and do the upper part. But if I was doing my full face, I would do lower lash, upper lash, upper lash. All right. So once you have mascara on, if you want, you can add falsies. I just did this side, but that's again because I have a condition where I lose my eyelashes naturally. But this would be more or less the finished look. So again, we're minimizing the brow bone by lifting this area and bringing this area forward. We're accentuating the cheekbones, the chin, and the nose with a little bit of a soft contour in a way that makes them seem a little bit less in your face, but in a way that's very flattering and softens the look. Same with the jawline. Again, lifting, lifting, lifting to give that kind of foxy effect. Um, I happen to have epicanthal folds that kind of droop over here because I'm Hispanic, but a lot of people who are Caucasian tend to have the eye shape more like this, to where, especially if you highlight this area, it'll be your tear duct area will be very prominent and very beautiful and like fluffy looking. I can't do that because of my anatomy, but if you don't have this fold that comes on this little C shape that happens here, and you do have like a really prominent like duct area, that could look really pretty with a little bit of like a highlight right here too. Ooh, we can definitely do how to do more masculine eyes as well. And it's kind of, in a weird way, the reverse of everything that we just did. You can kind of walk backwards from there. Um, I do recommend making the eyebrow area look a lot more fluffy, especially when you're using little eyebrow pen brushes like this, especially if you were assigned female at birth and you may have as like ascribed to your gender norms and kind of gone a little crazy with plucking your eyebrows and maybe they don't grow back. Eyebrow like hairs you can draw individually will go of significant length into making your entire eyebrow area look more masculine. Um, you can also use, I know a lot of people who are trying to look more masculine tend to use the mascara trick on like whatever little peach fuzz they have. Don't go that dark, please. Use an eyebrow mascara instead. Something like this. This is like a light taupe color. You can kind of go over like your mustache area in and these little areas in very lightly, and it'll make them more prominent as well. You can also contour to make your jawline look more gaunt as well and more angled as well. So, general rule of thumb, circles are more feminine, angles tend to be perceived as more masculine. But today was all about feminizing makeup. I know we did go over the time a bit, but I am super duper stoked to continue to teach you guys makeup, and I'm super excited to continue to do this again. And I'm hoping that everyone learned at least a little bit of something. And again, I'm sorry if I went a little bit fast in some spots.